officially, this is our like season preview episode of Unlapped. And this is how my brain works. Like if you ask me how many days until X, how many days until Australia, I'll be like, well, do we count today? Do we count the day that it actually happens? But then I'm like, if I just fast forward through the week, then it's not just this week, it's like next week. So like Australia is happening next week. That's how my brain works. So bottom line is the season is almost here. We have like what, technically 10 days until it actually happens. When do you guys leave, by the way?
Saturday. We've ended up on the same flight, which isn't always the case when
Oh,
you go
Schmoopy.
away. Yeah, I know.
How
Yeah.
cute.
So if you want a live podcast of Unlapped, it will have to be sans Nicole, but get on the Cathay Pacific flight
There you
to
go.
Hong Kong via Melbourne via Hong Kong, and you'll get us both on there.
Okay, all right. So we'll figure that out.
Oh,
But why
also,
don't
I don't know if I'll be in much state to do one. I'm just going to be putting a film on or something for the flight.
is that what you're gonna do? That's
Yeah,
not
probably. Yeah,
long
I don't
haul.
really
You
know.
have to have like the glass of wine, and then you have to take maybe a little bit of like Tylenol PM, and then just
See,
Yeah, sleep is a
ours,
valuable commodity when you're flying
Mhm.
to Australia, and then becomes even more valuable when you arrive there and you're awake at 4 a.m. with nothing to do and your body won't go back to sleep. So sleep is definitely top of my
You
list,
have
but
to do it. Yes.
yeah, it's pretty
All
it's
right.
pretty brutal flight.
So as long as we're officially previewing the season, why don't we just sort of kick off like with the Ferrari discussion? Because obviously they've not won a drivers' championship since 2007 with Kimi Räikkönen. They've not won the constructors since 2008, so the season after that. Is this legitimately their best chance to do one or both?
well,
The
I can see in
2024-5 season.
I can see in the background of Nate's video for
Oh, his
anybody
book.
watching on YouTube. You can see a brand new book there, and I know he's too
I was
modest
going
to
to plug it later, but
plug it
I'm glad you
himself,
jumped
but I'm going to get in there early. But it also makes Nate perfectly qualified to answer this question because he has literally just written the book
Written
about
the
it.
book on
So
it.
over to you, Nate.
And it is called How F1's Most Famous Team Can Win Again. So, it's not out in the US until the end of April, but it's out in the UK tomorrow, which happens to be World Book Day. Coincidence? I don't know. You you tell me. But yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I mean, there's been lots of occasions Ferrari could and should have won a title. If you look at 2008, you mentioned that year with the constructors, they should have won the drivers that year, or they could have won the drivers. There's 2010, 2012, 2018, 2022. So there's been moments they just haven't kind of they haven't had the right stuff in the right moment to win. But I think Laurence and I have spoken about this before, but there's been a real change since Fred Vasseur took over. A lot of the peaky emotions that we saw with Ferrari for years they've not gone away completely. I think they're still there, but Fred's the great. I think Charles has called him the great leveler a bunch of times, where he's
Mhm.
come in and he's really just he's the lightning rod for that team. All of the good and all the bad goes through Fred, and he churns it out, and it's just kind of the same emotion coming out. And sport and history is all about drawing parallels to what happened before. Very similar happened when Schumacher was winning because Jean Todt, another
Mhm.
French team boss, was able to do that. He came from outside the system, wasn't tarnished by a lot of the politics in there. And so now I think you've got a lot of things coming together. You've got Lewis in there, you've got Charles in there, you've got Fred in there, you've got this team that's been building and building and building. So I would say for a long, long time, I mean, there's been moments Ferrari absolutely should have won a championship, in the last decade, at least one. But this is the best chance they've had, in recent memory, because last year the constructors' fight they were in, it seemed a bit like a bonus, didn't it? By the end of the year, it was like, oh wow,
Yeah.
we didn't expect to see this from Ferrari. They did a great job, but McLaren, maybe didn't utilize everything they could have done early in the season. Red Bull fell apart in the way they did with Perez, so it felt like the door had been left open for Ferrari this year. Coming into the season, not just is there the expectation is there, but we know the baseline of the car is pretty good as well, and they have the operation humming as well. So, yeah, I think it is. I think it is the best chance for a long time. But that doesn't just because I've given you that great summary doesn't mean you shouldn't go buy the book when it's out because it explains it in much more detail
Right,
over like 200,
obviously. Yes.
260 pages.
Got it.
I spent a bit of time wondering where to do the podcast, and then I was like, I'll just do it here with
You
this
need to
facing.
you need to do like a poster of the book cover and then hang it over your right shoulder. So then it's just like on the
Yeah.
big giant white space that you have, you can just do the book right there.
Well, the great thing is when you do a book, you get a box full of competitions, and I haven't given all of them to family and stuff yet. So I've actually got like 3 copies down here. So I could have just put I could have put them all over the screen,
You should.
parallel to each other. That would have been a
Really
bit of
like a
overkill.
missed marketing
You're
opportunity
right. This
to work
this
on
white
this.
wall here, yeah, blew it.
One of the things that I think like sometimes when I look at, and you mentioned it, when I think about like Ferrari's opportunity, part of the Ferrari opportunity is so directly tied to um, other teams basically not living up to expectation. And I think when you think of that, we'll have the McLaren conversation separate because does anyone not agree that they look like the best car? Like they
Yeah, I think they're a
right.
step ahead.
But so
Yeah.
Ferrari is in the position they're in because they're taking advantage of some of the good things. And then you look at what like Red Bull, and they have just like, I don't want to say that they've tanked, but compared to where they were at the end of the 2022 season when Max won everything, or was it 2023? What
It was
year is it
both.
right now? What
It-
year? It's 2025.
yeah.
2023 season when they won most of the races, and then at the beginning of last season when Max was doing it, like they've gone like this and everyone else has used it as an opportunity to go up. And looking at testing, and obviously Max has a tremendous amount of talent, and I feel like you could put Max in like a shoebox and he would still figure out how to make it work.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure Perez did that, and I'm not sure Liam Lawson can do that. So like the gap there is going to be seen again, and I don't have the same amount of confidence in that Red Bull that I used to have.
I agree. And I think a lot of this is now relying on Max. And I think one of the key quotes that came out of testing was from technical director Pierre Vacher, who in the press release, this wasn't like, when put under pressure in a press conference, in the press release said that the team is not as happy as it could be because the car didn't respond how we wanted at times. Now, you might just read that and think, oh, well, yeah, whatever. But that's actually really worrying in testing because one of the main job in testing is basically to run through various setups, understand how the car responds, and then have all that knowledge to go into any race scenario and any practice session where the car's not doing what you want. You say, well, in testing, we put the ride height at this level and that solved that issue. And, or we put it down and we got the downforce that we were looking for, and we can live with that by making changes to these different things with the suspension. Stuff like that is crucial. Now, if Red Bull aren't going into the season knowing all that, it sounds like this car is going to be really hard to drive. And we know that was a trait throughout all of last year and basically ended Sergio Perez's career as a result. Max Verstappen, as you rightly say, was able to drive around it. But one of the things that they really wanted to focus on this year was a wider operating window, like, an easier car to drive, a car that is more predictable. And I think they kind of owed it to Liam Lawson after, putting him through 11 races in Formula One, then putting him into Red Bull. That's such a quick progression in any Formula One career. They kind of owed it to him to have this car that was drivable on the limit. And it already looks from Bahrain, okay, unusual circuit. There were high winds, I think, on the final day. It was a bit cold earlier in the test. So perhaps when we get to Australia and it's warmer, the car will come alive. But at the moment, there's a real concern that it won't. And again, you're relying on Max Verstappen to make up the difference. I think if you're going to have a driver to make up the difference, he's your man. But it is asking a lot, especially when, as you say, Nicole, the quality of the competition now of those top four teams, all of them has just stepped up to the Red Bull level. And I think, we shouldn't just focus on the fact that Red Bull have lost performance, or haven't made the performance that they were expecting. The other teams have done really well within this regulation set to close the gap, find performance. And so, yeah, the combination of both means that I think Red Bull are now just looking at Max and saying, can you do this? We kind of need you to do
But
this.
honestly, like that's also unfair because I think the one thing that we absolutely saw last year when it came to the Constructors' Championship was the fact that Max could go out and win the Drivers' Championship. Max had that under control for the most part, the majority of the season. But when it came to the Constructors' Championship, he needed to have the performance of a teammate. And like that was where Red Bull like fell off. It was a basically a one car effort. And the other teams had, Ferrari had both their drivers in it. Obviously, McLaren had both their drivers in it. And that was the difference. And having one guy who can drive the shoebox and then the other guy who was struggling. Like, when do you think last season it started to go down? I feel like I remember it being in Miami that it started to go downhill
Yep.
for Red Bull. And then also that happened to coincide with the news about Adrian Newey. So like it's easy to like look at that and be like, that's why. But like how much validity is there to the fact that when they lost Adrian Newey, they just sort of started going in the wrong direction?
Well, Newey and a number of people at the team have since said that they were kind of aware of these limitations in the Red Bull in 2023, even when they were winning all those races, occasionally they would bump up against these problems with the setup and the drivability. And they'd be like, oh, okay. But they had the lead over the rest of the pack to be able to, just make the setup slightly more benign and get away with it.